In the quiet theater of American life, where dreams are chased and futures built, there exists a pervasive undercurrent, a silent script played out in countless acts. It's a script written not with ink, but with assumptions, with history, and with the heavy weight of unspoken biases. And sometimes, in the most unexpected moments, on the most ordinary of days, that script erupts into a scene of jarring injustice, a stark reminder that for some, the simplest act of existing can be an act of defiance. Today, we delve into one such act, a story that unfolds not in the shadows of a back alley, nor in the hushed confines of a courtroom, but under the bright, indifferent sun of a suburban afternoon. A story of a man, his hard-won success, and a single defining question fired at him from the barrel of a police officer's suspicion. That's not your car. Our story begins with Michael Robertson, 42 years old, a husband, a father of two, and a man who had built his life brick by painstaking brick from the ground up. He wasn't born into privilege. He forged his path with intellect, grit, and an unwavering belief in the promise of hard work. Michael was a software engineer, a principal architect at a major tech firm, a mind that could untangle the most complex algorithms, a man whose expertise was sought after, whose contributions were valued. He was, in every measurable sense, a success story. And on this particular Tuesday afternoon, Michael was living that success. The California sun, warm and generous, filtered through the panoramic glass roof of his pristine, pearl-white Tesla Model S. The hum of the electric engine was almost imperceptible, a quiet testament to modern luxury and innovation. Michael was heading home, a short drive from his office campus, looking forward to his wife Sarah and the evening chaos of homework and dinner with his 10-year-old daughter Maya and 7-year-old son Jamal. He was in a good mood. A complex project had just been successfully deployed. He'd hit all his targets for the quarter. Life in that moment felt good, felt earned. He took a familiar route, cruising down Elmwood Drive, a tree-lined artery that wound through his affluent, diverse suburban neighborhood. Houses here were set back from the street, manicured lawns stretching towards mature oaks and sycamores. This was home. This was his sanctuary. He signaled a left turn onto his street, preparing to slow. It was then, in his rearview mirror, that he saw it, the flicker, the telltale flash of blue and red. Initially, he dismissed it. Surely it was for someone else, perhaps a speeding teenager on one of the side streets. He checked his speed. He was well within the limit. His seatbelt was fastened. He scanned his mental checklist. Nothing. But the lights persisted, growing brighter, closer. The distinct, urgent sweep of a police cruiser's strobes filled his mirror, and then the brief, sharp bark of a siren, a command, an undeniable order. Michael's heart gave a single hard thump against his ribs. A familiar, unwelcome coldness began to spread through his chest. It was a sensation he knew too well, a primal alarm system that for black men in America often activates at the sight of flashing lights. It was the feeling of a target suddenly appearing on your back, not because of what you've done, but because of who you are perceived to be. He took a deep breath, slowing the Tesla, carefully pulling over to the right-hand shoulder. He put the car in park, his hands instinctively resting at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, just as he had been taught, just as he always did. Every movement was deliberate, measured, non-threatening. He knew the script, he knew the unspoken rules, and he knew the stakes. Through the darkened tint of his darkened windows, he saw the officer approach, a young man, early 30s perhaps, wearing the crisp, dark blue uniform of the local police department. His face was unreadable beneath the brim of his cap. As he drew closer, Michael began to roll down his driver's side window, just a few inches, enough to speak, but not enough to fully expose himself to whatever might come next. Michael calm, even. "Good afternoon, officer." The officer did not return the greeting. His posture was rigid, his hand resting near his sidearm. His eyes, though, were fixed, not on Michael's face, not on his license and registration, but on the interior of the sleek, high-tech vehicle. There was a flicker of something in his eyes, something Michael had seen before, a look he knew intimately. It was a look of suspicion, of disbelief, of an unyielding assumption that something here just didn't add up.
And then the officer spoke, his voice now laced with a thinly veiled skepticism. Sir. Officer drawing out the word sir, skeptical. Sir, do you know why I pulled you over? Michael, genuine query. No, officer, I don't. I was going the speed limit. My turn signal was on. Everything seemed in order. Officer scoffs, short and sharp. Because. The officer leaned closer, his voice dropping slightly, becoming more pointed and accusatory. Because that's not your car. That's not your car. 3 simple words, but in that moment, for Michael Robertson, they were not just a statement, but a brick wall. A wall built from generations of stereotype, of preconceived notions, of the ingrained belief that a black man driving a luxury vehicle like a Tesla must, by default, be operating outside the boundaries of legitimacy. It was an accusation, an insult, a profound dismissal of his very existence, his hard work, his success. Michael felt a surge of heat rise within him, a familiar anger beginning to simmer, but he suppressed it. He knew that anger, expressed in this scenario, was a dangerous weapon that would only be turned against him. He had to stay calm. He had to be reasonable. He had to fight with logic, where emotion would only fail.
Michael, controlled frustration. Officer, this is absolutely my car. It's registered in my name. I purchased it 2 years ago from the Tesla dealership in Santa Monica. My license and registration are right there in your hand, both matching my name and address. The officer, however, wasn't looking at the documents. He was looking at Michael. His eyes narrowed. Where did you get this car? Michael paused. The question was ridiculous. It was invasive. It was irrelevant. But he answered it anyway. As I just said, officer, I purchased it, legally, with my own money. I work as a software engineer. A software engineer. He finally looked down at Michael's driver's license. His eyes scanned it, then flicked back to Michael's face, as if searching for a discrepancy. And you expect me to believe a software engineer drives a car like this? The absurdity of the situation pressed in on Michael. He was a professional, a contributing member of society, a taxpayer. He had earned his car. He had every right to drive it, to own it. And yet, here he was, being interrogated, his legitimacy questioned, his very presence in his own vehicle deemed suspicious simply because of the color of his skin. Officer, with all due respect, what does my profession have to do with my ability to own this vehicle? Are you implying that a black man cannot be a software engineer? Or that a software engineer cannot afford a Tesla? The officer bristled, perhaps sensing Michael's shift from passive compliance to a more assertive, though still respectful defense. I'm implying nothing, sir. I'm asking questions. This vehicle, a high-value item, is a known target for theft, and I'm simply doing my job, ensuring this car is not stolen. Then please check the registration. Call it in. The VIN is on the dash. Everything will check out. The officer hesitated, still holding Michael's documents. His gaze drifted to the passenger seat, then to the back. Do you have anything illegal in the car, sir? Any weapons? Drugs? No, officer, I have nothing illegal in my car. I'm just trying to get home. Step out of the vehicle, please. Keys on the dash. The chill of the outside air, despite the warm sun, felt suddenly colder. Michael slowly, deliberately, opened his door. He placed the key card, with its elegant Tesla logo, on the dashboard, as instructed. He stepped out, closing the door softly behind him. His hands remained visible, open, at his sides. He stood by the driver's side door, waiting, trying to control the tremor in his hands, the rapid thump of his heart against his ribs. The officer moved around the front of the car, inspecting it. He ran his hand along the fender, peered through the windows. He seemed to be looking for, what? Scratches? Signs of forced entry? Evidence of a struggle that simply did not exist. Then he returned to Michael. Do you have a remote start for this vehicle? No, officer. It's a Tesla. It's all app-based, or the keycard. So you're telling me you can start this car with your phone? Yes, that's correct. The officer's eyes narrowed further. It was clear he was not familiar with the technology, and rather than admit that, he seemed to default to deeper suspicion. He then pulled out his radio. Dispatch, I'm running a 1027-1029. Need a VIN check on a white Tesla Model S. Plate number... And I've got one subject, male, black. Cooperative but evasive. Standing by. Cooperative but evasive. The words stung Michael. He had been nothing but cooperative. He had answered every question, followed every instruction, maintained a calm demeanor in the face of escalating unwarranted suspicion. His only evasiveness was his attempt to assert his rightful ownership, to articulate the simple truth. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Michael stood there, a successful professional, an upstanding citizen, on the side of his own street, next to his own car, under suspicion for daring to own something that, in the officer's mind, he had no right to possess. And then the officer received a response over his radio. Michael couldn't make out the words, but he saw the officer's posture stiffen. He turned back to Michael, a new, almost frustrated expression on his face. The VIN comes back clean, registered to a Michael Robertson. As I told you, officer. But the address on the registration, it's a different address than where we are now. This is Elmwood Drive. The registration says Oakwood Lane. Michael, for a moment, was taken aback. He had moved 6 months ago, just a few blocks away, to a larger home to accommodate his growing family. He had updated everything else, his driver's license, his bills, his subscriptions. But in the whirlwind of moving, amidst the unpacking and the settling, changing the address on his car registration had slipped his mind. It was an oversight, a minor administrative detail, a common occurrence for anyone who had ever moved. But in this charged atmosphere, it felt like a trap had been sprung. Officer, I just moved. 6 months ago. It's just a few streets over, in the same neighborhood. I haven't updated the registration yet. My driver's license, however, has the correct current address. He gestured towards the license the officer still held. The officer looked at the 2 documents, then back at Michael. The look of suspicion, which had momentarily wavered, now returned with a renewed intensity. He saw not a reasonable explanation, but a potential new layer of deception. He saw not an oversight, but an inconsistency. So, you're telling me that you're driving a very expensive car with an outdated registration, and you expect me to believe this is all perfectly legitimate? The distinct wail grew louder, echoing through the quiet street. Michael looked up, seeing another police cruiser turn the corner, lights flashing, heading straight for them. Backup. For what? For a man standing calmly beside his own car, offering explanations, complying with every demand. His heart sunk. This wasn't just an inconvenience anymore. This was escalating into a serious, potentially dangerous situation. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that once multiple officers were involved, the dynamic changed. The presumption of guilt solidified. The room for error, for misunderstanding, for a simple, logical explanation rapidly vanished. The second officer, older, with a gruff demeanor, pulled up behind the first cruiser. He exited his vehicle and approached, his hand resting on his service weapon, his eyes assessing Michael with a critical, almost hostile gaze. What's the situation here, Miller? Officer Miller, emboldened by the arrival of his colleague, gestured vaguely towards Michael and the Tesla. Suspicious activity, Sergeant. Subject driving a high-value vehicle. Registration doesn't match current address. Claims to own it, but something feels off. Something feels off. The insidious phrase, the catch-all justification for suspicion, for harassment, for the erosion of civil liberties. It was the subjective feeling of an officer, translated into an objective threat, and wielded against a man whose only crime was existing in a space that, by unspoken decree, he was not supposed to occupy.
Sergeant Davies, the second officer, now turned his full attention to Michael.
He looked him up and down, a slow, deliberate appraisal that felt more like an inventory than an observation. All right, software engineer, let's see how much you know about this car. The sergeant began to fire off a rapid series of questions, testing Michael's knowledge of his own vehicle. What's the battery capacity? What's the maximum range on a full charge? How do you open the frunk? He was trying to trip Michael up, to expose him as a fraud, to prove his suspicion was justified. Michael, despite the rising tide of anger and humiliation, answered each question calmly and accurately. He knew his car inside and out. He knew the specs, the features, the quirks. He had researched it extensively before buying it, and he enjoyed every aspect of its advanced technology. The battery capacity is 100 kilowatt-hours. On a good day, I can get about 370 miles, and you open the frunk, he demonstrated by pulling up his phone, navigating to the Tesla app, and with a tap, the front trunk of his car silently popped open. Like this. The sergeant's face remained impassive, but Michael saw a flicker of surprise in his eyes, quickly masked. He had clearly expected Michael to falter, to be exposed. When that didn't happen, the officers simply doubled down on their suspicion. All right, step away from the vehicle. We are going to need to search it. A search? On what grounds? I've answered all your questions. The VIN is clean. My license is valid. This is my property. Probable cause, outdated registration, suspicious demeanor, a high-value vehicle. We have reason to believe it might be involved in criminal activity. Michael knew, intellectually, that he could refuse a search without a warrant, but he also knew the reality of that refusal. It would escalate the situation exponentially. He could be arrested for obstruction. His car could be impounded. He could be facing a much more severe and protracted battle, all for the sake of asserting a right that in this moment felt utterly powerless. He raised his hands slightly in a gesture of resignation. All right, but I want it on record that I do not consent to this search. Noted, Sergeant Davies said dismissively, already moving towards the driver's side door. The next 10 minutes were an excruciating ballet of humiliation. Sergeant Miller and Sergeant Davies began to go through Michael's car. They opened every compartment, rummaged through his briefcase on the passenger seat, pulling out his work laptop, his files, his carefully organized pens. They opened the glove compartment, scattering the contents, maintenance records, an old pair of sunglasses, a small box of tissues. They even went through the front trunk, where Michael kept a small emergency kit and his charging cables. Michael stood, his hands still visible, watching them desecrate his private space, his sanctuary, the symbol of his hard-earned success. Each item they touched felt like a violation. Each open compartment felt like an invasion. They saw them exchange glances, whispering occasionally, clearly finding nothing, but unwilling to admit their error. His mind raced. What if they planted something? What if they found something that wasn't his? The fear was real, palpable, a cold nut in his stomach. He was a black man, alone, surrounded by 2 armed police officers who clearly believed he was guilty of something, anything, simply because he was a black man driving an expensive vehicle. The injustice was suffocating. After what felt like an hour, but was likely only 15 minutes, the officers concluded their search. They had found nothing. No drugs, no weapons, no evidence of theft or criminal activity. Just the mundane, everyday items of a successful professional. Sergeant Davies straightened up, looking at Michael with a grudging, almost angry expression. He held his registration and license in his hand. All right, Mr. Roberson, we found nothing, but you still have an outdated registration. That's a violation. We're going to issue you a citation. Michael nodded, a small hollow gesture. He knew he was getting off easy in their eyes. No arrests, no impoundment. But the cost was immeasurable. The cost of his time, his dignity, his sense of security, the psychological toll of being treated like a criminal for simply driving his own car. Officer Miller retrieved his ticket book from his patrol car. He scribbled for a moment, then handed the ticket to Michael. Make sure you get that updated, sir. Michael took the ticket, his fingers brushing against the cold, crisp paper. He glanced at it. A minor infraction, easily rectified, but the memory of this afternoon, the sting of those 3 words, "That's not your car," would not be so easily erased. Am I free to go, officer? Yes, you're free to go. Have a good day. The words felt hollow, a perfunctory dismissal. Michael didn't respond. He simply walked back to his car, opened the door, and slid back into the driver's seat. He didn't look at the officers. He didn't want to. He just wanted to leave. He wanted to go home, to Sarah, to Maya and Jamal, to the sanctuary of his own life, far away from the judgmental gaze of suspicion. He put the Tesla in drive. The silent hum of the electric engine felt different now, no longer a symbol of achievement, but a beacon of unwanted attention. He pulled away from the curb, slowly, carefully, watching in his rearview mirror as the two police cruisers remained, their lights now off, their presence a lingering stain on the street. Michael drove the remaining few blocks to his home. He pulled into his driveway, the white Tesla gleaming in the afternoon sun, an ironic monument to a success that had just been so profoundly questioned. He sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, the adrenaline slowly draining from his system, leaving behind an aching emptiness, a profound weariness. He thought of Maya, of Jamal. What kind of world were they growing up in? A world where their father, a man who worked tirelessly, who contributed, who achieved, could be stopped, questioned, and humiliated simply because the car he drove didn't fit a narrow, prejudiced narrative? How many times would they, too, face similar encounters not for what they did, but for who they were? Sarah met him at the door, a worried look on her face. She had seen the police cars on Elmwood Drive. "Michael, what happened? Are you okay?" He just shook his head, unable to speak, unable to articulate the depth of the insult, the sting of the injustice. He wrapped his arms around her, burying his face in her shoulder, needing the comfort, the understanding, the quiet affirmation that he was indeed where he belonged. The next day, Michael took care of the citation. He went to the DMV, updated his registration, and paid the small fine. The bureaucratic process was quick, efficient, and utterly devoid of the human tension that had marked his interaction with the police. But the incident stayed with him. It burrowed deep into his consciousness, a stark reminder of the ever-present reality faced by Black Americans. It wasn't about the car. It wasn't about the outdated registration. It was about the assumption. It was about the immediate leap to suspicion, to criminality, simply because his appearance, in the eyes of some, did not align with their preconceived notions of who could own such a vehicle. This wasn't an isolated incident. Across America, Black individuals are disproportionately stopped, searched, and questioned by law enforcement, often with far more devastating outcomes than Michael's. Studies consistently show that racial profiling is a pervasive issue, creating a profound sense of distrust and fear within communities of color. The simple act of driving, of walking, of existing in public spaces becomes a fraught exercise in navigating a system that often views them through a lens of suspicion rather than respect. Michael's story is a testament to the resilience required to navigate such a world. He chose calm over confrontation, logic over emotion, and ultimately, he endured. But his experience also serves as a poignant, painful reminder of the work that remains to be done, the work of dismantling implicit biases, the work of fostering genuine understanding, the work of ensuring that, for all Americans, the simple act of driving your own car is just that, a simple act free from the weight of judgment and the threat of injustice.